Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this working group Taxpayers Union Hamilton West by-election debate. Apologies for starting a little bit late. We've been having some technical issues, which unfortunately means that our very exciting poll graphics that were going to be on this screen here are not. So I will be imparting those results to you verbally. So please bear with me. Just before I begin, my name is Callum Purvis. I am the campaigns manager for the Taxpayers Union. For those of you who don't know, the Taxpayers Union is a pressure group with over 200,000 supporters across New Zealand, and we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and now more accountability. So we look to expose waste in government and also hold our politicians to account. So you're very welcome here, and we're delighted to be working with the working group again to co-host this debate, so you can hear from some of the candidates in Hamilton West as part of this by-election campaign. Now, Hamilton West is what could be described as a bellwether seat. Since 1969, when it was created, it has gone with the party that the whole of New Zealand has gone with as the largest party in Parliament every time except on one occasion. So the result that we see on Saturday will be a very good indication of what the result in the upcoming general election next year will be as well. So we've seen a lot in the past few days, U-turns from some of the parties on the right over their tax policies, and also some interesting funny business around entrenchment on three waters from the parties of the left. But the nation will be looking to you in Hamilton West to give your verdict on all of that in the by-election on Saturday. So before we begin, we have the results of our exclusive working group Taxpayers Union by-election poll. This poll was conducted on Sunday, the 27th of November, which was the final day before people were able to start advanced voting. It was a poll of 400 residents randomly selected in Hamilton West. 320 of them were polled on the phone, and 80 of them were polled online. So I'm going to run through the results with you, and again, apologies, because it would have been good to show those results to you on the screen. So before we get to the main event, the electorate decided voter poll, we'll just run through a few issues. So we asked people in Hamilton West what was the most important local issue to them. And the most important one, on 29%, was law and order, followed closely by the cost of living on 23%, and there were a number of others on 6% or lower, such as housing, health, COVID-19 and roads. So the two main ones were law and order and the cost of living. There was, however, a big difference between age demographics in which of those two main issues were the most important to them. For those 40 and under, it was by far and away the cost of living on over 35%. But for those 41 and up, law and order was the top issue, particularly for the over 60s, where it was 43% of over 60s put law and order as the most important issue for them when they're thinking about how they're going to vote in the by-election. We also asked them about three waters, a very important topical issue at the moment, and whether they supported those reforms or not. 49% of those polled said they opposed three waters, and 20% said they supported the three waters reforms, with 32% unsure, which is broadly in line with our national polling on the subject. And you could see that parties on the right, ACT and National, there was strong net opposition to the Three Waters reforms, whereas for Green voters and Labour voters, it was pretty evenly split between those who supported and those who opposed the Three Waters reforms. We also asked an interesting question when it comes to by-elections, which is name recognition. So how many people who we spoke to had heard of the candidates? We would probably expect in a by-election, with people knocking on your doors repeatedly and delivering leaflets very regularly, and all of the parties descending on a single constituency, for that to be between 60 and 70%. Now, for all the candidates, it was much lower than that, perhaps reflecting the lower key nature of this by-election. So in the lead on that measure was Tama Pataka on 40%, followed by Georgie Dancy, Labour's candidate, on 30%, and James McDowell on 18%. But as I say, lower than we would expect for a by-election normally. So in terms of the meat party vote, we asked the respondents to the poll which party they would vote for if it were a general election tomorrow on their party vote ballot paper. So of all voters, 37% would vote for National, 27% would vote for Labour, 8% would vote for ACT, 4% for the Greens, and 4% for other parties. 20% of voters were undecided. So once you remove the undecided voters, that puts National on 46% and Labour on 34%, with ACT on 9%, the Greens on 5%, and others on 5%. Now, if we look at our nationwide Taxpayer Union Courier polling, which we do each month, we're currently projecting a 13% swing from Labour to National compared with the 2020 general election result. On the basis of this party vote poll in Hamilton West, however, it would suggest a 20% swing from Labour to National. So National are actually significantly overperforming in this electorate poll compared to our regular national polling. I won't go through the demographics because there's quite a lot of them, and we will be releasing the full information after the debate today. But moving on to the electorate vote, which is the one that's most important for you who are voting in this by-election. So we actually prompted for all 12 candidates in this by-election and asked voters, went through all of the names and then asked them which candidate they would be supporting to try and replicate as best as we could the actual process they would go through when they're deciding which tick which name to put their tick against on the ballot paper. So by that measure, we had 33% voting for Tama Pataka, 24% for Georgie Dancy, 8% for James McDowell, 3% for Gaurav Sharma, and 4% for other candidates. 28% of voters were undecided. So when we remove the undecided voters, we have National on 46%, Labour on 33%, ACT on 12%, Gaurav Sharma on 4%, and others on 5%. So if this were to be replicated on Saturday, then clearly National would have quite a convincing win. However, there are a couple of health warnings with this poll. This poll is a snapshot in time, it's not a prediction, and there are two particular health warnings I would like to draw your attention to. One is that 28% of voters remain undecided. That's nearly 3 in 10. That's quite a lot and could significantly narrow the gap between Labour and National if they were to split significantly in favour of Labour. The second thing to bear in mind is turnouts at by-elections are significantly lower than turnouts at general elections. So take the recent Tauranga by-election, for example. Fewer than half the number of voters voted in that by-election as voted in the same electorate at the general election. So turnout will be key, and which party can get its supporters to the polls over the next few days and on Saturday will obviously be victorious in that by-election. So good result for National from this poll, but it's still all to play for. And I think with that, I will hand over to Martin, who will move on to the debate portion. So thank you.
Kia ora Aotearoa. This is the Taxpayers Union Hamilton West by-election debate, hosted by the Working Group, New Zealand's best weekly political podcast that isn't funded by New Zealand On Air. I'm your host for this evening, editor of the Daily Blog, Martin Bradbury, and joining me tonight on the far end is my podcast permanent panellist, the 132nd most important libertarian columnist at Stuff, Damien Grant. We are streaming live tonight. Oh, get out of here. We're streaming live tonight on the Daily Blog, the Taxpayers Union, Facebook and YouTube, and it will be available afterwards on demand. Tonight, we will probe each candidate on 5 issues that are confronting our nation. We aren't just interested in their promises to Hamilton West, we are interested in how they will provide leadership on the big issues confronting New Zealand right now. Cost of living crisis, crime, the economy, the environment, and public services. I have to warn all 5 candidates now that I have an allergic reaction to party spin lines, and if I hear vacant answers to important questions, I shall not hesitate to be sarcastic. Thank you so much, but there are 5 up here, aren't there, love? You won't like me when I'm sarcastic, trust me. After I have quizzed you on each of our issues, Damien will challenge their answers. At the end, you will each get a 60-second uninterrupted final word appeal to voters on why they should vote for you and your vision. This by-election matters because it is a political fight that provides different symbolic wins for each party as they go into the 2023 election. For National, to show the power of their confidence, they need to win this by-election with a resounding victory and large majority. For Labour, facing low polling and intense post-COVID animosity, a small loss here would still be a wider political victory. For ACT, a double-digit result would be an enormous political victory for them. For TOP, 5% would also be a huge political victory. And for Dr. Sharma, just standing on his principles makes him a winner. I urge every Hamilton West voter to vote this Saturday because your voice will symbolically impact the entire election. Let us begin tonight's debate by introducing our invited candidates to this evening's live-streamed event. From the newly formed New Zealand Momentum Party, the former Labour Party MP for Hamilton West, Dr. Gaurav Sharma. From the National Party, Tama Potaka. From the Labour Party, Georgie Dancy. From the TOP Party, Naomi Pocock. And from the ACT Party, Dr. James McDowell. Welcome to you all. Let's begin this evening with an opening 60 seconds from each of you on your vision for Hamilton West. Dr. Gaurav Sharma, your 60-second vision, please. Microphone. Dr. Sharma, your time starts now.
Kia ora, everyone. All right, so my name is Gaurav. You've already seen me on the TV. Look, I used to be a local GP. I was your member of parliament. I'm here today, we're all here today because I raised some serious concerns with the Labour Party about how things were going. This wasn't just about bullying, there's a lot of other things going wrong. This election is not about party politics. This is about choosing an electorate MP who can work hard for you, and I've already proved that. 52 constituent clinics in different neighbourhoods of Hamilton, being transparent about the cases we've done, thousands of cases, all published data out there, and it takes 12 months to set up an MP office. By the time one of these guys get elected and they set up their office, the general election would have already started. If you want to get your work done, you need somebody who's ready on day one to go ahead. That's one. The second thing is, if you get the Labour MP elected, 64 becomes 65, 63 becomes 64, National 34 becomes 35, nothing's going to change. They're entrenching 3 warders, these guys are asleep on the wheel. So nothing's going to change with that, it's all going to be the same. What you need is an independent voice which can challenge the government of any colour, neither red, neither blue, both colours, because that's where the problem is at the moment. We're not being heard at all. I could go back and do medicine. Even before, I get paid peanuts compared to what I used to as a doctor. But this is about fighting for the cause and actually holding government accountable.
Thank you very much. National Party candidate Tama Potaka, your 60 seconds starts now.
Kia ora everyone, and thank you for coming. I'd like to acknowledge the candidates here today also. My name is Tama Potaka. I'm the National Party candidate for Hamilton West, and I'd like to be a strong voice for Hamilton West, for you, the hard-working people of Hamilton West, and also make Hamilton the best place to grow up and grow old in New Zealand, not the ram raid capital of New Zealand, which is referred to as today. I've had a lot of experience in Hamilton working for Tainui Group Holdings as part of a team. We helped build the base. I led the building of houses out at Rotukoti, ran a few community and charitable events with my wife, and also built these two hotels over here, the Novotel Tainui and Ibis Tainui in rezone Ruakura. I'm part of a team at Tainui Group Holdings. I was part of a team, and I want to be part of Chris Luxon's new government that's coming next year. One of the things that I believe in is doing the work and getting the rewards. If you don't do the work, you shouldn't get the rewards. And at the moment, what I see is Labour government spending a lot of money on people who are not doing the work. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, thank you. Georgie Dancy, your 60 seconds starts now.
Kia ora koutou. Look, Hamilton is a wonderful place to live, and that's why I've made it my home. I live here, I work here, and I'm bringing up my kids here because I know what an awesome place it is. When I'm out in the streets talking to the people of Hamilton West, the feedback's the same, and that is that these are really challenging times. You know, the cost of living and crimes that we've discussed already this evening and will go on to do are really at the front of people's minds, and that's why they want a really strong local progressive voice to represent them in Parliament. So look, I've lived in Hamilton for 20 years. I'm a local business owner who employs 10 staff, and we're the first gym in New Zealand to be living wage accredited. I'm also a union leader. And I didn't just move to Hamilton 6 weeks ago to run for Parliament. This is my home, and I understand the issues that are facing people of Hamilton West. Thank you.
Amen, thank you. Dr. James McDowell, your 60-second vision for Hamilton West, please.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is James McDowell, and I am an ACT Member of Parliament, just a list MP, and so this by-election is a fantastic opportunity to send a strong message to the government by voting ACT, and I'll move from being a list MP to an electorate MP, and then when it's actually a 2-for-1, we'll get another MP as well. From Christchurch. So look, it's really a shame. As a Hamiltonian myself, it's a shame to see what has actually become of the city in terms of crime. It is absolutely everywhere, every business you visit, and you talk to people in their homes and they're really feeling it as well. The burglaries as well, just of people's private property is just off the charts. So that's the number one issue, as I'm sure we're all going to be talking about tonight. Certainly something that I want to be focusing more on as an electorate MP. This has been my home for 17 years, and I've got to say it's been an interesting 2 years down at Parliament, just watching this government ran through legislation under urgency time and again, making bad laws, and just proving that actually a single party government's not a good thing. Thank you.
And finally this evening, Naomi Pocock from TWOP.
Kia ora koutou. Do you think everything's going well? Would you like to see fresh ideas that are based on evidence-based policy led by experts? Are you sick of the political antics? I am. I'm standing for the Opportunities Party, Naomi Pocock, and we want to bring evidence-based policy to the centre of New Zealand to show the way forwards, not left or right, but forwards in the direction that we all want to go. Affordable housing, climate change resilience, an efficient economy. All of these things are doable, but for 30 years we've had both National and Labour talking a different talk, but walking largely the same walk to the opposite of all these things. This is not a two-horse race, and we should not ignore the 30% of voters who are yet to be decided on this election, and some of the people who may yet to change their mind. So standing for the Opportunities Party to bring solid, evidence-based policy to the centre of New Zealand and get rid of the political antics. This is your chance to say the status quo must go.
Tom.
Kia ora.
Can I just quickly just add something? Sorry, because
jump on in.
somebody just mentioned,
get on there.
the candidate moving 6 weeks ago. Well, I'm the only one here who actually lives in Hamilton West and can vote for Hamilton West by-election.
Okay.
I mean, and that's important because if you haven't been to the local school, you haven't been to the local rest home, you don't actually live here, then if you live in Hamilton East or you live in Taranaki King Country, it's not the same thing.
Cool. Yeah, good call. Thank you, candidates. Let's start with issue 1 and the cost of living crisis. Post-COVID build back New Zealand has been plunged into a cost of living crisis created by the urgent need to underwrite the economy during a once-in-a-century pandemic, exacerbated by an explosion of geopolitical frictions and global supply chain meltdowns that are literally importing inflation into the West. Those machinations are cold comfort when week after week we feel the highest inflation rates for 30 years biting our pockets at the duopoly supermarkets. Dr. Gaurav Sharma, the government's proposal to regulate the obscene supermarket duopoly would allow retail shoppers to enjoy lower prices in normal times. But these are not normal times, and this regulation won't work. What must the government do to ensure competitive low prices at supermarkets to gain people lower prices during the cost of living crisis?
Thank you. Very good question. One thing I'll say is if you go to the Labour Party Facebook page and you look at how many times they've posted about this supermarket duopoly, I've never seen anybody mine so much credit out of something that's never happened. Like, they talk about it every week. We are doing something about supermarket duopoly. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. There's going to be a commission. This is going to happen. Well, 6 months on, we still haven't seen anything. What we're suggesting is remove the GST off fruits and veggies, right? Doesn't matter. You're rich, you're poor. It affects everybody, right? It's not about the top 2% or the people who are on dole. It's about everybody, and we need to encourage people to have healthy fruits and veggies. It also helps our local growers and farmers because they get to sell their products at a cheaper price. So that's the starting point. I do agree, it would be nice to have break the duopoly down and especially support our local greengrocers as well. That didn't happen during COVID times as well. You were allowed to go to Countdown, but you weren't allowed to go to your local greengrocer. So there is a problem with policy, and part of the problem is the government is actually on the side of big business, not on the side of the common man.
Excuse me, Naomi, could you pass your, he'll need that. Dr. Sharma will need that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Damien, your response and question to Dr. Sharma's answer, please.
So, fresh fruit and veggies. So, dried grapes, raisins, are they fresh fruit or are they not? No.
Question, and I know this is what the government's trying to say as well, right? Like, how do you define different products? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Australia's been able to do that. India's got 6-7 different types of GST brackets. A lot of countries are able to do that. We've got different tax brackets for people. I'm sure we can do different GST brackets for fruits and veggies. It's all about defining it, right? I'm not saying I'm going to be the one defining what is fresh fruits and veggies. We will get experts like you to do it.
Oh, not me.
But the point is,
Don't do that.
It can be done. It can be done.
You lost the room right there.
But it can be done, right? The answer from the government can't be that you can't regulate a GST and define what these products mean. It can be done, and I think it's not just about fruits and veggies, right? It's the essential items. What about toilet paper? Everybody uses toilet paper. Bread, eggs, milk.
Okay, all right. So tobacco. That's an essential service. So I just want to drill down on that just a little bit. So you talk about 15%. So I think one of the things that's lost in this debate, and I just want to drill down a little bit on it. If you say cost of an apple is $1.15, so you take the GST off, that doesn't mean that the price is going to go from $1.15 to $1, does it? Because there'll be a whole pile of inputs on that apple all the way through the production chain. So my question is, if you take 15% of the GST off fruit and vegetables, what's the actual price reduction that the consumer will see?
So it'll obviously be based on what. So you remove the GST what the customer is paying, obviously, right? And that the supply chain will obviously adjust it based on what you've removed.
Yeah. So the inputs are removed. So the actual, when you consider GST as something like 4% of GDP, then probably you're only looking at about 4 or 5%. And then the issue will be the cost that goes on to it. Look, it's a very popular policy. I'm not going to deny that, but I just think it's important to challenge the idea that if you take 15% off, that there are going to be no transaction costs, and that 15% goes straight to the bottom line.
Definitely, and and it also helps with other things, right? We're talking about obesity. We're talking about dental health.
I feel you're talking about me and Martin, and frankly,
I'm talking about myself at the moment.
We take that personally, Martin. Move on.
Comrades, we must move on to National Party candidate Tama Potaka. Comrades, National has claimed government spending is the cause of inflation and have argued cutting wasteful spending will lower that inflation. How is it a win for citizens during a cost of living crisis to then have to pay for the services that you cut?
Well, let's assess in detail some of the wasteful spending. We're talking about $200 million looking at a light rail in Auckland. Just looking at it. For a light rail that's apparently going to cost $30 billion. Well, that's outrageous when all it's going to move are about 40,000 Aucklanders. Sorry, that's a great example of where Labor's just throwing money at ideas to help the Mount Albert electorate, amongst others. And what we need to do is look at ideas that Labor has had, projects, pet projects, and say what are in the Mickey Kiore or the Mickey Mouse category and what are in the real category. And a lot of the projects today are in the Mickey Mouse category. Those projects and taking money out of hardworking Hamilton West people's pockets and throwing it in projects is helping to contribute to inflation.
Damien, your response and question to Tama's answer?
I'd like to, because these numbers get thrown around, but in the scheme of government spending, they're de minimis. The real spending is in areas like health and education and welfare, and
they failed in those too.
So my question is, if you're going to cut spending, aren't you going to have to either? Because at the moment we're looking at a $10 billion fiscal gap. So what's National's plan, if you get in, to close that fiscal gap by either cutting some of the spending or increasing the tax revenue? They've already gone back on the 39 cents in the dollar. So how do you close the gap as Rishi Sunak is doing in London?
One of the key things that we need to focus on here, Damien, in my view, is targets and deliverables. And the health system is a great example of that. You go up to Waikato Hospital, you go in with a cold and come out with a flu. We can't have that, sorry. When you have to wait, 92 people had to wait more than 24 hours to get ED treatment in September. Okay, and all those things come back to targets. The health sector is a great example where there are no targets. Yeah, the criminal justice system is another one. The target is reduce the prison population. Okay, you've reduced the population, but crime has increased dramatically. I'm not saying that's causative, but there seems to be some correlation with that. When you have targets and different things across different portfolios, you get really, really focused. And what we find with the Labor government right now is it's ignoring the advice of people who are experts who actually work in there, a la John Bonning up at the ED department in Waikato Hospital.
Comrades,
so I just want to drill down. So one of the ideas that the Nationals done in the past was that they have Crown Health Enterprises. Actually, might be a question for Dr. Sama. You had the hospitals were run separately from the department. So the regional health authority would say we need 4,000 hip replacements, and they could get them from the Crown Health Enterprise, or they could get them from Southern Cross Hospital. So things like that, things like charter schools, these are things that certainly ACT has got them behind. Where do you sit on those sorts of efficiencies?
Well, before I pass the microphone back to my Auckland grammar friend here, what I'd say is that when you have a Reserve Bank double mandate, which you love talking about the Reserve Bank, Damien,
I do.
That double mandate, that actually drives some pretty nefarious outcomes. And so what we're saying is focus the Reserve Bank on the price stability. Don't get it driving employment up and up and up, and then all of a sudden, next minute, you're not allowed to buy Christmas presents for your kids.
But my question was, how do you feel about things like charter school, Crown Health Enterprise, or even the separate...
Charter schools are a wonderful idea, especially when most of them actually succeeded, and one very well out in West Hamilton, supported by Robin Radcliffe, called Te Kōpuku High School, led by people who actually know what they're doing, Hemi and Katharo. So that was a great example where the charter school was enabled, it was working very well, and all of a sudden, abracadabra, we're back to ideology of Labour.
Comrades, we must move on to Labour Party candidate Georgie Dancy. Comrade, Labour have not yet committed to extending the petrol tax excise cut past January. You know the community is doing it tough. You know the food banks are exploding. What message will you be taking to Labour regarding extending that petrol tax excise cut to help people combat the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, thank you. And keeps turning on off the mic.
It's the national candidate.
Kia ora, yeah, and I just do want to acknowledge the cost of living in that. We go into any supermarket in Hamilton and you could see that that prices are going up, and acknowledge that it is tough out there. You know, as a small business owner, I opened my business this year, and so I've really, as the person who's responsible for finances in my business, you know, understand that real push that we have. Well, in regards to what Labor's doing and the extension, is that we have implemented a number of strategies, and we have targeted them at elderly and low and middle income earners in order to manage that inflationary aspect of it. So, for example, the cuts to fuel costs, our cost of living payment, our winter energy payment, and also our half-price public transport. And I mean, I'm interested because I'm hearing from the National candidate that Labor isn't doing anything, but I haven't actually heard many policies from National about what they do want to do. What I've heard about is a tax cut to the top tax bracket, which is inflationary, and they then turned around and went back on. And I've also heard about a boot camp, which has already been tried by the National Party and failed. So I guess I'd like to know from Tama exactly what these policies are. If you disagree with the Labor ones, fair enough, that's democracy. But I want to know from you what National Party policies actually are in this space.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, go for it. He can answer that. Yeah.
It's a little trick that I have for everyone. Look, let's talk about crime because Labor's very soft on it.
No, we're
Very,
talking
very
crime
soft.
soon. We're talking
Yeah.
crime soon.
Well, no,
We
but
want
she
to
went
keep to
there.
the
She
cost
went
of
into
living
crime.
crisis.
Okay, she went into crime. What we've said with cost of living crisis, we have a 5-point plan. Labor has no plan. Their plan is economic mismanagement. And that's why we're in the state that we're in
So
today.
what are the 5 points?
Number one, reduce the bottlenecks in the economy. Actually allow nurses to come to country quickly rather than just letting gamers come to the country quickly, which is Labor's policy right now. Second one is reduce all the wasteful spending. Okay, well, we've mentioned some of those. This fanatical idea about moving 40,000 residents in the Mount Albert electorate, that's got to stop, right? It's got to stop. I'd rather use that money to 4-lane out to Piarere and build the Southern Links. You know, $30 billion, really? Okay, number three, reduce the costs. So costs that Labor's heaping on businesses in particular, things like jobs tax, brand new idea. Okay, stop, it's got to stop. We're going to tax everyone in this room out of making a living. Okay, the Reserve Bank, we've talked about sorting out the price stability and the bureaucracy and the immediate bureaucracy spend that's going on. 14,000 extra people in Wellington compared to 2017. $1 billion extra per week Labor is spending right now per week than under the John Key government. Now, across those 5, Damon, you could pick 1, 2, 3 or 5. I'll miss 4 because that's not an option for you. 1, 2, 3 or 5, and that will start bringing back the economy into a space that we want it to be in, not the spiral or the pandemic of the economy that we're in now.
Comrades, we have to move on to...
So we'll move on, but I just
you
want...
were the one who gave him this...
well, I mean...
No, it was my fault. I asked him. It was me.
He's so compelling.
But I would like to respond to that. Look,
1 minute.
the National
It is a
Party
debate.
candidate has said that the Labor government is spending $1 billion per week extra. What I'd like to hear from you, Tama, is tell me what would you cut? Would you cut the 1,600
This
new
isn't a
police
debate
officers,
between National
the
and Labor. This is
4,000
getting a little
new
dull.
nurses?
All right.
Or would you cut the investments into health and education?
all right.
Being asked the question.
All right. Okay. So Georgia, I want to just want to pull back on some of the stuff. You become a business owner, and I congratulate you on that because one of the best things you can do for the economy and society is to own and run a business. So I congratulate you on that. I want to drill down though. You're talking about the cost of living crisis, and one of the issues, or certainly one of the arguments, is that the dual mandate that the Labor government has given the Reserve Bank has contributed to the level of inflation that we are now seeing. So do you agree with that assessment that the dual mandate has contributed to the level of inflation, or do you think that we should keep that dual mandate, the dual mandate being the central bank has to cover inflation and sustainable unemployment?
Yeah, I mean, on that question, we know that inflation is an issue and it's happening all across the world, in Australia and the US and the UK in regards in the back of COVID. What we're doing is doing what we can to manage this inflation, and what I see is the Labor government is doing that.
So, but my question was, do you agree that the Reserve Bank Do you believe the Reserve Bank should be focusing inflation and sustainable employment? Or should the Reserve Bank just be targeting inflation?
No.
That's the question. Let Georgie answer.
Yeah, I feel like the Reserve Bank. Did you say unemployment?
So at the moment, the Reserve Bank has an instruction, a mandate to focus on price stability and maximum sustainable employment. So the question that Tama threw out is that he thinks that National's view and others is that the Reserve Bank should only focus on price stability. So that's my question to you. Do you agree with the current Labor position?
Oh, got it. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree that both need to be focused on. We've got record low unemployment. We've got the highest wages in this country. I wouldn't be part of the Labor Party if I didn't support high employment in this country.
Amen. Comrades, we must move on to
Can
our
I just
party
jump in,
candidate,
please?
Dr. James
Quickly.
McDowell.
Sorry. I was the only one in caucus, so I'm just going to quickly jump in. Come on, please.
Come on.
All right.
Okay.
Look,
let's hear it.
I was the only one in caucus, right, last year, and I heard Grant Robertson talk about this, and he said, well, look, it's nothing to worry about. 3 months, everything will be sorted. So this was around December last year. Then we come to March, April. He's like, well, don't worry about it. By August, everything will be sorted. And then August, he said, well, everything will be sorted by this year. Now he went to Washington, D.C., back to the university I did my MBA from, and he goes, well, actually, the feds are now talking about it. It's all going to turn to custard, and I think it's going to be now 2024. So the first problem is, right, and this is the same with the Prime Minister. She said there was not a cost of living crisis until people got really up in arms about it. So the first problem is this is the same. There is no crisis of crime wave happening all around the country. We're just proud of everything, and Hamilton West is a great place to live in.
Comrades, we
But
must
that's
move
not
on
true.
So let's hear from James.
Party candidate, Dr. James McDowell. Comrade, ACT wants a massive cutback in spending while handing out tax cuts. Liz Truss infamously attempted this right-wing experiment in the UK and saw her economy implode. Voters fearing a cost of living crisis don't want to have things made worse by political experiments. How will ACT help voters with the cost of living crisis?
Yep. So just on that, I mean, the UK is a good example of what not to do, which is to do these big tax cuts without actually costing it, without actually working out how you're going to pay for it. Yeah. One thing ACT does every year is we make a fully costed alternative budget. Saving our last one was $7.2 billion annually. So, look, that's how you do it, and that's how we fund our tax system, which would provide relief to all people who pay tax, of 17.5% being the bottom rate, and then 28% above, and it just simplifies the whole thing and gives a tax cut to everyone. And before you ask, for those that actually fall below that bottom, they might ask about the lower thresholds. That's why we've got our basically the relief provided from carbon incentives and that sort of thing, and other things to make up for that. So nobody will be worse off. But I mean, when it comes to inflation, and we're talking about the Reserve Bank before, we've got to rein that in. And you've got the Reserve Bank creating, and they're admitting this, they're creating a recession, and it's just hurting Kiwis like this, like crazy in the back pockets and at the supermarket, because the inflation is just off the charts. So what's the government doing about it? How is Grant Robertson actually trying to counter this high inflation to stop the Reserve Bank from lifting its interest rates? It's the only way they can deal with it and hurt people's mortgages. Well, he's spending lots of money. He's wasting lots of money, and there's all this government wastage running through the economy, which is just a really, really dumb time to be doing it. When inflation is so high, why would you do that? It's just making the situation worse. That's why we've done a fully costed alternative budget, and that's one way to keep costs down and to rein inflation.
Damien Grant, your response and question to Dr. James McDowell's answer, please.
So the 17.5%, unless we've got some really creative Laffer curve arguments, that's going to result in a big drop in taxation revenue. So the question then becomes, I know we're talking about, the Ministry of Women's Affairs and the Human Rights Commission and two organisations, so that should be scrapped. But that's not going to cut it. So what is the actual level of services that are going to be reduced? How are you going to square that circle and not end up where Liz Truss found herself in?
Indeed. Look, that's why we've done this fully costed budget, and saving $7.2 billion in the process. But we can, if you go through that budget, you'll see there's no cuts to core services and frontline services. It's looking at the bureaucracy, this utter bureaucracy that we've created in Wellington, which is costing taxpayers a fortune. We've got to rein that in and put a pause on these big projects as well. Tama's alluded to a few of them. Look how much Three Waters is costing. Just amalgamating all of that. So, talk about the $350 million with Radio New Zealand TVNZ merger, of which is going through a very dubious process at the moment. So, look, it can be done.
Yeah,
Comrades,
because I actually think that this is going to be an issue for ACT, right? Because I'm not too sure that those talking points really wash. You are talking about a significant reduction in tax revenue, and so you talk about a fully costed budget. But what I want to know, and what I think the electorate is going to demand, is specifically what spending is going to be cut. So if you're going to tell me you're going to sell all of the schools and make them all private, I mean, that would be music to my ears. But I suspect it may not run that well with the rest of the electorate. So you talk about a fully costed budget. I'd like to pull out for the residents of Hamilton West what changes are they going to see on the ground as a result of the reduced government spending?
How many children will have to climb up chimneys and sweep them? That sort of thing.
Only the skinny children, though, because.
Look, just look at the growth of the public sector since 2017. More than 10,000 new employees. Excellent. Just doing God only knows what in a lot of cases. And look at education, the thousands of new employees in the Ministry of Education, and what's happening with truancy, what's happening with education standards, right? It's just absolutely going backwards. There is a heck of a lot of waste that we can cut. Zero basing that public service, going back to those numbers, I believe it's 17,000, that have grown and really not, arguably not added very much. But look, it's line by line. It's when I say fully costed, I mean we've done all the numbers of how we would pay for this, and we've been communicating this for probably about half a year since we released that. So
it's terrifying.
Now I would, can I just say one little thing, because you mentioned schools, and no, I'm not going to announce privatising all the schools, although but no, I just mentioned about charter schools because that was raised before in the discussion with Tama, and I would say that charter schools are one of the best schooling models and initiatives that we had here in New Zealand, and it was a great ACT Party initiative led by David Seymour.
Comrades, we must move on to top candidate Naomi Pocock. Comrade Top is suggesting a universal basic income. How is this any less a political experiment than Act Slash and Burn tax cut bonanza? How will this help voters with the cost of living crisis?
Thank you very much for the question. And can I just say, as a research-based party, I appreciate the research that you have put into all of these questions. So well done.
Don't do that. Just goes to his head.
And your deeper questions
don't
as well.
Ask
so both
him
of you.
anything.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, so the cost of living crisis is, well, first of all, largely driven by the cost of housing crisis, rents and mortgages going through the roof relative to incomes over decades, hurting the next generation and those at the bottom, particularly the rent payers. So the Opportunities Party wants to rebalance the system, hence my tipped signs all around town, and provide a tax switch. And so the first step in this is to offer a tax-free threshold, so the first 15,000 earned tax-free.
Amen.
And that is the first step towards a universal basic income, which will allow the system to be set up. Now, universal basic income puts money into the pockets of the people instead of driving it into housing, as we've seen in recent years, and it supports small business because people have money to spend in business, and it reduces private debt, which is also an issue in New Zealand. Public debt, not as much. Private debt, yes. So big props to universal basic income across the board. It puts money into your pockets directly to spend how you like. And also, it flattens the welfare system out. So at the moment, beneficiaries are punished for working. They lose so much money that for a chunk of their time, they're working for effectively $2 to $4 an hour. Would you do that? Work for $2 to $4 an hour? That is what is effectively happening to our beneficiaries as a thing called abatement. It flattens that out and it incentivises beneficiaries to work.
Damien Grant, your response, please.
My concern, I have many concerns with the universal basic income, not the less it was designed by Dr. Morgan, but like Georgie, I'm an employer and I struggle with staff retention, particularly in this current environment. Given that we have near record low unemployment, what's the systemic economic risk to providing. So if a universal basic income is going to mean anything, people are going to need to live on it. That's going to make it hard for people to maintain staff, particularly in the kind of what you could call unskilled or low-skilled sectors. So isn't that potentially placing an enormous burden on small businesses?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So the evidence is showing, and there have been multiple trials of universal basic income all around the world, that we think, the psychology of a UBI, we think that the next guy is going to stop working. But the evidence is showing that most people work the same or more when they receive a universal basic income. Nobody wants to be poor, right? We all want to get ourselves ahead. You don't lose it when you work. So what you earn on top of it, you keep earning. The only two groups that work less are youth who go and retrain themselves and further themselves for their future, and parents who tend to spend more time with their children, which I'm the education spokesperson for the Opportunities Party, and that is something that from a child development perspective is really important. It supports business because it lifts the burden off small businesses, and in terms of, increasing the minimum wage all the time and businesses having to pay for that. So it's lifting the burden off small businesses, it incentivises work, and that's what the evidence is showing. So we need to listen to the evidence and not just what we think about the next guy sitting next to us.
Thank you, candidates. We must now move on to issue 2 and crime. Post-COVID, media coverage of youth crime has exploded. Images of ram raids and organised crime violence has shocked, frightened and angered the country, with a 25.2% increase in theft and a 19.7% increase in acts intended to cause injury. The recent stabbing and killing of a dairy worker in the Prime Minister's own electorate has become emblematic of a narrative the government is soft on crime, while the Get Tough on Crime cheerleaders promise terrible retribution. Tama, aggravated robberies of commercial premises doubled from 2015 to 2017, from 599 to 1170. Why didn't the national government solve crime then, and what are you promising to do to solve crime now?
Look, I'm really focused on the people of Hamilton West and what I'm hearing on the street. And the fact is that since 2017, these ram raids have increased over 500%. And as you know from the Waikato Times report recently, gang numbers are basically bigger than police numbers in Waikato right now. Now, those stats are absolutely astounding. They are just not in the space that we want to be in Hamilton West to make this the best place to grow up and grow old. Now, we have recently released a policy around youth serial offenders for those people young people that are around ages 15 through to 17 that are really at the heart of a lot of the ram raids in Hamilton West right now. They're not completely doing all of the ram raids, but they are at the heart of a lot of the ram raids. In fact, a lot of these kids don't even need a car to ram raid anymore. They just get an axe or a tomahawk and go and smash things up and walk in during broad daylight. So you might know those guys down at Vapies across the road from Gallas on K Drive. Last week, Sadat, the guy at the counters, on his knees with a knife at his neck, while those guys bash up the counters, take their stuff, and the shop owner cannot get insurance anymore. Once the insurance goes, of course, as you know, there's one more burglary and that shop's gone. Then the landlord can't tenant it out to anyone because the new tenants find out that there's been something like this and they don't want to take it on anymore. So you've got an epidemic of crime right now in Hamilton West. We all need to face up to it, and ultimately the Labour government needs to own it. Just own the problem. Don't come to Hamilton and make the hard-working people of Hamilton West live in press announcements and $1 million of fog cannons that won't arrive before the Labour government is turned out next year.
Yep.
That is what it is. Labour government, soft on crime, we will do things, and the starting point is to give those kids a chance. Don't give up on them. Give them a chance. Link them in with military academies, which we've talked about, with community groups and church groups, and make it happen. Here's the facts.
So your solution is
don't rely on your
ankle bracelet.
opinions.
Your solution is ankle bracelets on fucking 10-year-olds.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And you just, that's hang on. That's actually an option for the judiciary right now. It's not our option. What we're saying is that is an option for the judiciary. What our solution is for those young people, 14 to 17, that are at the core of the ram raids in Hamilton right now, we've got a path. We're not going to give up on them. We've got a pathway, linking with community groups, church groups, iwi who are successful in helping those people rehabilitate. Give them a chance. Now, the military academies that happened under John Key environment, there's a lot of funky opinion out there what happened. But here's the facts. 57% of those kids reduced their serial offending. 15% reduced altogether and did not reoffend. And it's better than what's happening right now, where we're off the charts for offending by youths. Kia ora.
Damien, your response?
Yeah, I mean, just in response to, I can tell you that deterrence works. All right. So if people do something, and if people do something and there's no consequences, they keep doing it until such time as they get put away. And I can talk from experience on that one. But Tama, I want to drill down on this. Are you talking about a return to the wraparound policies that Bill English had, which I don't think John Key really believed in, or are you talking about a more prescriptive, harder line approach on dealing with youth offenders? Because those two policies don't seem to gel.
Well, what we're talking about is after years, and we've seen this over decades, 3 or 4 decades ago, those things didn't work, and we know it, and there's a Royal Commission on Abuse and State Care, right? And things have refined since then. We went through the John Key days with those boot camps. Not everything worked, but some things did work, okay? And that's great. Now we're in a space where we've evolved from there, and we're saying you need the wraparound over a period of time, not a 2-week period of time, not a 6-week period of time, but a 2-year period of time to get these young people back into pathways like being a diesel engineer on a frigate to Singapore, earning 80,000 K, rather than busting up 5 days in a row, 5 bergs at Ehrlich Ave with Gavin and Praveen, who own it there. Same kids, 5 days, 5 bergs, same people.
Comrades, we must move on to Labour Party candidate Georgie Dancy. Comrade, Labour have pledged $10 million in fog cannon funding. Why hasn't it taken so long to roll this program out? Isn't this just another example of Labour talking a good talk but failing at delivery?
Kia ora. Yeah, I want to first just acknowledge the crime that's happening across the country. I think all of the candidates here and everyone in the audience can really feel for those businesses that have been targeted. What I'll say regarding the fog cannons is this is just one more step in addressing the issue. Labour have invested in over 1,600 new police, frontline police across the country since coming into office. We also have our crime prevention fund, which if you look at the ram raids, 13% of ram raids have occurred in Hamilton, and so far 15% of the crime prevention fund has been implemented. And reflecting on that, there's also been an additional announcement which means that aggravated robbery is included in being eligible for that crime prevention funds. In regards to the fog cannons, just evidence-based, we know that if a place has fog cannons, it's less likely to be targeted. So we think they will make a significant difference. We've also had 1,000 fog cannons already introduced over the past year or so, and that will add to this.
Damien, your response?
All right. So if we just let the candidates answer the questions. So Georgie, but my question to you is, why do you believe according to the media, certainly we've seen a spike in this sort of criminal activity in the last 6 or 12 months. Why do you think that's occurring?
There has been a spike, and that's something that the government is focusing on addressing. I think that those spikes, there's a lot of reason for that. It's become quite fashionable for young kids to do this, unfortunately. The uprise of social media and filming it, unfortunately, has become a bit of a thing. But what we really need to focus on is ensuring that we address this. But there are 2 issues here. Well, I mean, there's 2 solutions, right? There's the policing issue, and that's I've spoken about, the investment in frontline police. But there's also the wraparound community support that's vital to ensuring that our communities are safe and investing in health and education so that young people don't get to the point where they feel like they need to do these crimes.
So if I just one more,
Yeah.
why, or do you agree with the claim that Tama might make that the social investment Bill English program, at least the allegation is that was abandoned by the incoming Labor government? Do you agree with that assessment? And if you do agree, why do you think that happened? And do you think that may be contributing to the problems we've got?
The issue with the boot camps, as Tama has...
No, the social wraparound.
I agree with the social wraparound. I agree with what Tama said. We need social wraparound. There's two parts of this. There's tough policing, and there's ensuring that our communities are protected and that we have social support to protect these people. One of the ways that the Labor government has done this has been the first government that has really invested in mental health services in this country, which means we have more counsellors in our schools.
All right. Well,
of all the things to go for, I don't know.
Sorry, can I please just summarise the Labour...
Comrades, we must move on to ACT Party candidate Dr. James McDowell. Comrade, ACT have pledged to put ankle bracelets on 11-year-olds, while National have promised to put them on 10-year-olds. Who's right?
We didn't promise that.
Well, I'll just maybe they're trying to one-up us because we released our policy a few months ago.
That's right.
No, look, I mean, I know it sounds harsh, but the reality is when you've got, say, a 12, 13-year-old, whatever, breaking into stores, destroying the place, vandalising it, threatening people's lives and livelihoods, and destroying them in the process. Look, an ankle bracelet after repeated offences, I might add, an ankle bracelet is not bad in the grand scheme of the harm that they're actually causing. So look, we do need to step that up. If for repeated offenders, while they're wearing the bracelet, if they're cutting it off or if they're still doing these things together, which would be really dumb, but that's when you have to start thinking about like a more secure kind of facility to try and rehabilitate them and get them out of the cycle. So if I could I also just sort of go over briefly to the retail crime prevention program, so that's been spoken about. Look, even I was caught by surprise when I asked in question time the Minister of Police about this fund because it was about 6 months since they first announced it, and at the time it was a $6 million pledge. And when I asked how many businesses in Hamilton had actually had, bollards or anything like that, any of these preventative measures installed, finished, using this fund, I was caught by surprise. I thought surely after 6 months there'd be something. Like, I haven't found them yet, but there must be something. And the answer was zero, which was just astonishing. So look, that thing's been I've said before, it's been a total fail because the reality is the requirements were so high for businesses. They had to be ram rated multiple times, and they couldn't have more than 2 stores. They had to be small, which for a lot of these family-owned businesses, they just fall outside that. It doesn't work.
Damien, your response?
James, I just asked you the same question. Asked Georgie, why do you think we are seeing a spike in this sort of... Do you believe it's actually a spike? Do you think it's a media focusing attention on? What do you think is driving this particular spike?
Oh, it'll be failing education for a very long time. There'll be cost of living implications in there as well. And then there's, I'm not sure about disarming the population, I've just heard that, someone heckle that. But look, you've got this wave of crime. Yes, it's a cost of living thing. It's an education thing. It's a social media thing. All of the above. But it's also a justice thing. And what are the consequences? And if the consequences aren't there, if they're just finding cool ways to do this and they're doing it over and over again and nothing's actually happening, then it's just going to spiral out of control, which is exactly what has happened. And one thing that the Prime Minister said the other day is, we haven't, for crime in general, we haven't made changes to aggravated burglaries, for instance. We haven't reduced sentences, etc. Well, look, they got rid of 3 strikes, and aggravated burglary was a strikeable offence. So they have made changes. Look, I'll leave it at that for the follow-up, I think.
Naomi, Comrade Top are the only party tonight with policy that is arguing for fewer people in prison. Who would you not put in prison, and how is that going to make the community feel safer when they see violent crime every week?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I would say that putting people in prison exacerbates crime over time because prisons are like a school for criminals. And so putting them into prison and the cost of that to you guys is unnecessary when we can use other strategies to help them in life to avoid going to prison. I would also say that when we bring evidence-based policy to the centre of New Zealand's political decision making, we will avoid the political flip-flopping that you see every time the government changes. When the policy is evidence-based, then it will stick, and we won't have to keep arguing over these things because we will have some strength. So the Opportunities Party has three, a short-term, a mid-term and a long-term approach. So in the short term, we would support more police in communities, because when police know their communities, they can be preventative about crime rather than reactive to it. The second thing, which we haven't spoken about tonight, is funding for youth workers and frontline workers. This funding was reduced under National and carried on reducing under Labour. And if we don't invest in the front line, in the coalface, we will see this problem exacerbated well into the future. And the third thing, of course, is to eradicate poverty, which we have policies for. The universal basic income is one of them. And we know that this will take time, but we are dedicated to it. And it is all of our responsibility for the society that we're creating. And if you want to see things happening differently, you need to vote differently.
Damien, your response?
I just want to drill. I just want to drill down. I'm going to ask the same question.
UBI by 29.
I think it's instructive. I disagree with some of your stuff about deterrence, but what do you think? Listening to what the other candidate said, what do you think is driving the recent spike in crime? You're saying poverty. Do you think that's a specific driver here?
Absolutely. Poverty, cost of living, the horrendous, desperate situations that some of these people and children are living in and being brought up in. That is a result of us as a society voting the same, getting the same, voting the same, getting the same. Vote, status quo, status quo, status quo.
Comrades, we must now... Oh, angry turn. Okay. Comrades, you must move on to Dr. Sharma. Comrade, you have been voracious in your criticism and blame of violent crime on Jacinda and the Labour Party. Are you simply playing to the Get Tough on Crime brigade without any real solutions?
No, look, first thing I'm going to say is I was the Member of Parliament when the ram raids started. The first thing I asked the police minister was, how can we help this situation? And the only reply I got from Porter Williams at that time was call 111, right? And that is, but seriously, this is one of the main problems, right? We have a candidate here who's acknowledging, yes, businesses are suffering and all that sort of stuff, but we've got a Prime Minister who just completely refuses to agree that there is a crime problem. This is the same Prime Minister where her local dairy, in her electorate, a man died. She was here in Hamilton electioneering with the candidate. The day after she was in Chatham Islands, and the third day she was crying at the funeral, right? That's a problem. The other problem was when I went to meet the police, we organized a community meeting. The police said, well, Mark Mitchell is asking quite a few difficult questions. The police minister has now said the police is not allowed to meet with Member of Parliament of any party, including the Labour Party. So this is a government that is trying to silence the voice of MPs across the board. So there has been an issue. So I've been fighting for it within the caucus, and I'm vocal about it, right? And the issue is, first of all, acknowledge that there is a problem with crime. We're all saying it, right? Like we can all see what the problem is. But then we need to focus on the solutions as well. And deterrence is a solution, right? You can't say that if people get fined for speeding, we should just, stop fining them and they're going to stop speeding. That makes no absolutely ridiculous sense. We've got people, I was talking to an 80-year-old lady in Flagstaff. A 10-year-old breaks into her house at 3 a.m. Where are the parents? Who's being held accountable? Right? If parents are not involved, there has to be a guardian. There has to be Oranga Tamariki. Somebody has to be involved in this situation. They need to be held accountable. That's the first thing. The second thing is businesses need certainty. We're talking to businesses who've completely lost their insurances. A dairy in Puketi, first insurance company stopped giving insurance. Second insurance company went from $5,000 to $19,000. The guy doesn't know what to do. He wants to sell his dairy, can't sell the dairy because the price, nobody wants to buy it. He can't stay. Like every other day there is a ram raid. And you're talking about 13% crime ram raids of the whole country in Hamilton. Well, there was 3 today. The Avalon, on Avalon Drive, just close to where I used to work as a doctor, the gas station got ram raided. I think the Hamilton Zoo Everyday Eatery got ram raided too. There's another one. So all of that has just happened today. So there is a problem. It needs to be resolved. But one question I will ask the national candidate. We've talked about cutting costs they haven't really mentioned it. My understanding is that this boot camp program is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per person, right? So is that accounted for in the cost cutting or not?
Yeah, I think once you have a child on a pathway of crime, the liability long term is massive, and to spend a little bit up front to deal to it, that's a good thing for the country.
Damien Grant, your response and question to Dr. Sharma?
I think in the interest of moving things along, we'll just...
Let's do that then. Thank you, candidates. Must move on to issue 3 in the economy. Damien Grant has written 17,473 columns asking for Adrian Orr to resign. He's not. Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr is ratcheting up the OCR to levels many Kiwis haven't seen in decades, and he intends to crash the economy into a recession so as to save the economy. Georgie, the $51 billion Labour used to juice the economy and inoculate us from the worst of the pandemic inadvertently transferred $1 trillion in wealth value to the richest Kiwis, and according to the Reserve Bank Governor, the price to pay for that inflationary pressure is the slashing of 115,000 jobs. Why should the poorest pay most for inflationary pressures that enrich the wealthy?
The poorest shouldn't pay the most for inflationary pressures, and that's why the Labour Party has invested in support for the elderly, low and middle income earners, and I've already discussed the initiatives here today. The other aspect, which we've already touched on today, in order to address the inflation which we're feeling, and that is feeling across the world, as I've already said, is addressing that duopoly in our supermarkets. So having more competition will bring prices down and address inflation. As well as that, we're addressing our competition around construction and the products to do with construction, and increasing competition so prices come down and so we have more access to equipment and things we need.
Dr. James McDowell, comrade, will ACT sack the Reserve Bank Governor if they win next year, and would ACT call on the OCR to be lowered?
Well, it's a big call to make, but no, we've certainly been pretty firm in our criticism of the Reserve Bank and Adrian Orr, and it was disappointing their reappointment. So Grant Robertson's obviously got plenty of faith there. So concerning there, could you repeat the second part of your question? Sorry.
Will ACT call on the OCR to be lowered?
Well, the point is that yes, but you do it through good fiscal policy. By actually spending less and not putting all that money in the economy to slot around, then the OCR can actually naturally come down as well. But we certainly want to see that coming down. Going in there and trying to control things, you just have to have good fiscal responsibility management.
Naomi Pocock, comrade, the Labour government refused point blank to consider a capital gains tax. TOP have suggested a land tax. Why do you think, with a recession looming, that voters want a new tax?
It's not that voters want a new tax, but what we want to do is lift the burden off income earners and place it onto some of those trillions of extra wealthy people that we just mentioned. So this is a rebalancing of the system. It's lifting the tax burden off low-income earners and placing it onto the property, which in the 90s was supposed to be brought in as part of the economic reforms, but the government changed. There was no solid party in the middle holding us all to account with evidence-based policy, and therefore it didn't come into play. Therefore we've seen a spike in our house prices over 30 years relative to incomes. Compared to Germany, which has gone like that, we've gone like that. Okay, so it's time to rebalance the system and ease the burden on our income earners.
Dr. Sharma, comrade, if you are elected, what would you be asking the Reserve Bank Governor as New Zealand enters an economic recession?
Well, I guess the biggest problem here is now if you decrease the OCR or you slow the increase in OCR, you're going to see that the inflation go for a longer period of time. The recession will take a longer period of time to correct. But the problem is how the government has spent all this money, and billions of dollars are being spent every day. And if you look at the TVNZ RNZ merger, we recently had another debate where we were talking about it, and the Labour candidates said it's not an important priority. right? And we all agree it's not an important priority. TVNZ RNZ merger, I know you're going to say it's a small $350 million is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but there's so many of these examples. The DHB health reform, as a doctor, I've been saying for such a long time, all they've done is change the name on the notepad and everything else is the same. The operations just hasn't changed at all. Your waiting lists aren't any shorter. You're spending same or even more time getting to your GP and to a specialist, but the money has already been gone. $11 billion this year in healthcare, no new hospital, no new doctors, no new nurses, nothing at all. And that's across the board that's happening. So the spending definitely needs to be controlled. And I'll give you one quick example, right? This is the worst example of my door knocking in Hamilton. A 30-year-old man in Flagstaff, literally in tears. And he was talking about he started a business 3 months before COVID started. Things didn't go well, construction business. He's got hospitality business now. He can employ 25 people. He's only got 12 people employed. Unemployment rate is low because it's controlled. He's trying to get people from overseas. Immigration New Zealand says, well, you don't make enough money to hire more people. Well, he's saying his business is closed 4 days out of 7. So how is he going to show the revenue? His wife tried to commit suicide the night before. He was thinking of getting himself admitted to Henry Bennett Centre, literally in tears in the middle of a street. And then he started pointing out at his neighbours and he said, that guy there, the liquor store, that's been ram raided. That shop there, they've been affected by it. So there is no support for businesses. But his biggest problem on that day was that he was struggling to pay his mortgage. Right, and this is a guy in Flagstaff, not a guy in Norton or a guy in Frankton like me.
So, just listening to what you've been saying and the issues that you're focusing on, if I just take a step back, how and why did you become a Labour Party MP? Because you're...
That's a very good question. No, it's a good question. And it's good that you're asking. Everybody should be asking, right? Look, I agree with the policies that Labour Party talks about, that the Prime Minister talks about. Kindness. Kindness is important. Looking after your neighbours is important. All of that stuff is important, but all of that is in writing on a piece of paper, right? Ask Louisa Wall where that kindness is. She hasn't seen it. I haven't seen it. But there's a lot of talk about it, but it hasn't appeared.
Tama, Comrade, National have been clear that they want to cut wasteful government spending to lower inflation and navigate the country through the oncoming recession. Yet National still haven't been very clear about where those savings will come from. What public services will National guarantee won't be cut? Let's start there.
Well, let's start in a different place, actually. What about the 14,000 extra people, that the Labour government has employed as bureaucrats and all the wasteful spending on all the consultants? James knows all about that line by line. $20 million on one firm to help set up the Māori Health Authority? Are you kidding me? Okay, so there's all these costs that Labour are incurring on a day-to-day basis that we think are unreasonable. The balance has tilted, this is Naomi, tilted too far, just to loading the economy with more staff, more pet projects, more of what Labour wants to do. Now, education, great example. First, we've got to get the kids back to school. Number one, into training, back to school, actually attending school, and then probably, I'd say, you'd have a bit of a reduction in crime because actually occupied doing something rather than PlayStation in the morning and smashing 57 cars out of the Toyota in the base in a 1 hour period, then going to 22 cars out of the Volkswagen. In 2 hours, they smashed up 80 cars, a 9-year-old. This is what I'm talking about, soft on crime. Okay? So when you start talking about where are we going to cut, it's actually where are we going to focus our attention. That is the most important thing. Focus on basics. Getting kids into school and training, making sure nurses are actually here, not shooting off to Australia. Last month alone, 50 nurses resigned from Waikato Hospital. Where are they going to come from? There's actually a lot of jobs out there. I know 3 firms that need 5,000 staff right now. Okay, so it's not for want of jobs. It's actually people being in a space where they want to go to work to get the rewards rather than sitting down on Ulster Street waiting for the next week to go by. 33 weeks now in emergency housing, going down to Sports Safari and robbing it.
Okay,
that's what we have to focus on.
So in terms of public service, I'm just listening to what you said there. The public services that National will guarantee they won't cut: health, education. Was there another?
What? We won't be cutting the police. We actually need to support them more. That's what we need to support.
Okay. So there won't be, just so we've got this on the record, there won't be any public service cuts to health, education, or police under national?
Well, look, I'll turn to another issue which you really love, is the excitement over co-governance and public services, which we don't believe in. Kia ora.
So just
Damien, try and make sense of that.
So, and maybe this is a question we want to ask all of the candidates. So, co-governance. So that is a hard no from National, and that is something that you would.
Public services, no. We focus on need and delivering on need.
Except when you create it.
Hold on. So just talking about Three Waters, because that seems to be an incredibly intense issue. So no to co-governance on Three Waters.
No.
So looking at assuming that the Three Waters things.
Is it 3 or 5?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. But it might be difficult to actually unwind the transfer of assets.
Well, it will be if it's 60% entrenchment.
So you would allow the councils to appoint 100% of the directors on
the whole thing is undemocratic, the way it's been deployed and delivered. We all know that. The councils are shut out, and then Wayne Brown and the Christchurch Mayor said, actually, we don't believe in this either. Right? Now, the two biggest cities in New Zealand, their mayors have said, well, suspect. Okay, so what we're saying is it's undemocratic. It shouldn't be implemented right now. It's run through urgency with 24 other bills. James knows about this. He lives the dream every day. And it doesn't get any sleep, actually. So we have to say, no, we don't agree with it. And that sort of process needs council buy-in, just like the ETS ideas that the Labour government has foisted upon farmers. It actually needs the farmers' buy-in. One thing that I'm amazed with is that the Labour government knows everything. I actually don't know very much at all, but I know that I don't know.
Thank you, candidates. We must move on to issue 4 and the environment. Catastrophic climate changes are interrupting the agricultural calendar around the world and exacerbating global poverty and generating huge costs to the economy. COP27 was a waste of time with nothing agreed and over 600 representatives of the oil industry on hand to make sure nothing happened. Dr. James McDowell, I think ACT promised to roll back any and all environmental protections that compromise the ability to create economic growth. Does ACT take climate change seriously?
Well, yes, and I think that was a rather oversimplified explanation there, but...
you don't have to accept the premise of Martin's
exactly.
No one does. No one does.
No, well, yeah, anyway. Trust me, you get sick of hearing that from the Prime Minister day in, day out. Now, look, we would... definitely take this stuff seriously, and I think fundamentally from our point of view, it's what role does New Zealand have in the global, the global effort against climate change?
To show leadership.
And yep, there's a leadership thing there too, for sure. But if bigger countries like China and others are not playing ball on this stuff, then what progress is really being made overall? What we would say is, look, let's just take our top 5 trading partners and make sure that we're doing the same thing in terms of like carbon pricing and the caps as they are. So look, that includes some pretty sophisticated modern countries who are doing great things in the space as well. So look, so long as we're doing our part alongside them, because the other issue is if we go too hard on this stuff, then you've got New Zealand producers, whether it's industry or primary industries, whichever, manufacturers, who suddenly get loaded up with taxes. I mean, it's inflationary, it goes through to the consumer anyway, it reduces productivity substantially, and then, guess what happens? You get that leakage problem where all of the production goes offshore to countries that have lower standards than New Zealand does. So you just make the problem worse.
Naomi Top says it will work with all sides of the political spectrum to build a more sustainable and climate resilient future for all. National want to do as little as possible and ACT want to do less. How can Top work with them to create real environmental change?
Yeah, well, the Opportunities Party colour is teal, so bringing environment to the centre is what we stand for, and it's time for us to have these adult discussions in the middle of the political spectrum. In terms of climate change, we support building livable cities with plenty of parks and reserves for children to play, with safe cycleways so that children can bike to school safely while traffic still flows. Okay, so there are things we can look overseas. The way that the Opportunities Party operates is that we look overseas, we see what's working well, and we apply that to the New Zealand context. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It is possible.
Dr. Sharma, why would any Hamilton West voter concerned about climate change vote for you?
Well, look, I do sit in the middle on this because there are some good policies that Labour had announced. A billion tree program. Well, we haven't seen them being planted. I've gone with my team, done it 6 times, but I don't think that counts towards the whole billion. Similarly with the EV stuff, right? Like, I think it's a good idea to encourage people with the, with buying EVs, but we need a network around to roll out. They talked about hydrogen trucks being rolled out. That was supposed to, I think, start in, it was 2021. They haven't built one hydrogen recharging station. Rather, New Zealand Post has received the truck, but they don't know what to do with it because there's no hydrogen. Really. I've driven the truck twice, but
That's where my mail is.
Yeah. Right. So there are. I mean, look, we do definitely need to look at the climate, but we also need to make sure that New Zealand isn't just doing this for virtue signaling. There are big players out there who have big emissions, and we need to be right in the middle of it, where we are not taking away from our farmers, from our growers, who are actually out there doing the hard work, because we are losing industry. We barely build anything. Right? We can't even build a needle in this country. We've got farmers, we've got a few businesses. We don't want to discourage them, but at the same time, we want to encourage people to adapt to things which we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Tama, how does National balance urban voter concerns and rural voter concerns when it comes to climate change?
Kia ora. Oh, kia ora, sorry. Look, I have a view in the world that you can only get green through blue. Maybe a bit of yellow, but blue is the only way to get to green. There's no red in that. It's actually through blue. Okay, so we have a very broad church in the National Party. You've got urban people, Liberal people, Māori, Pākehā, Pacifica, all sorts of people, okay? But what we will not subscribe to is going out, setting up an emission scheme and forcing it on farmers. We won't do that, okay? What we are saying is you actually have to have buy-in. It's a bit like Three Waters. Let's just go and force it on the councils and tell them what to do. We won't do that to farmers, and we won't be in a situation where we have to import coal from Indonesia to fire up our plants.
Georgie, how on earth is being carbon neutral by 2050 a solution to catastrophic climate change that is happening right now?
I agree. We need to take fast action on climate change. Part of our goal to be carbon neutral by 2050, we've signed up to the Paris Agreement, and that means that we are accountable to our goals. One of the issues is that if we don't reach our goals, then we'd have to buy offshore carbon credits from other countries, which could potentially cost us billions of dollars. And that's not what we want to do. Look, we know our emissions come from transport and agriculture and industries, and we need to look at those and address them in order to be able to be sustainable in the future. The other thing to note is that a huge part of our economy is based on trading internationally as a small country. And what was I going to say there? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. A huge part of our economy is trading with other countries, and what we know from other countries is that they want to make sure that whatever practices we're using in New Zealand are sustainable. And that's going to increase over time as the whole world adjusts to climate change and wants to do more and more. So we have to make changes in this country in order to address that, in order to continue to trade with countries overseas.
Thank you, comrades. We must move on to our final issue tonight, public services. With the country facing an economic recession, post-COVID inequality and a cost of living crisis, Kiwis will rely on well-funded public services like never before. Naomi, what is the most important public service that you personally want to see funded more of, and where would you get the funds?
Me personally, as education spokesperson, I'm going to say education. The Opportunities Party thinks there's been enough shuffling of the deck chairs around how we spend our public funding, and we need to focus on back to basics, which is more teachers, nurses, police and paramedics, but we believe in quality as well as quantity, so we would fund them well, recognising the important job that they do in our society.
Thank you. Dr. Sharma, same question. What is the most important public service that you personally want to see funded more of, and where would you get the funds?
Well, look, as a doctor, obviously I would say healthcare, and it does make sense because that is, sort of the thing that connects a lot of things. Recently, I was door knocking, and one lady said to me, "Dr. Sharma, oh, you were my kid's doctor, and you did a referral for my son for ENT 3 years ago. Just been seen last week." Right? This is a 7-year-old who spent 3 years in the waiting list, half their life because of a learning disorder. Right? It's not going to help them if it is delayed, and we're seeing that across the board. People are leaving. 12 nurses applied with the Green List program that the immigration minister had. When I was in Labour caucus, I did a really comprehensive report on how to integrate foreign doctors and nurses into New Zealand. So it's not about increasing immigration. 900 plus doctors in 5 years came to New Zealand but couldn't get a job here. They'd already passed their exams and everything. So we need to invest in that. And it's a small investment compared to $1 million of training new doctors. These people are already here. So healthcare is the biggest one. Doctors, nurses across the board.
Tama, what is the most important public service that you personally want to see funded more of, and where would you get the funds?
Right. So it's not about increasing funds across the board, mate. It's actually about delivering outcomes and getting things done. That's the absolute key. Okay, you could increase the inputs, which is what the current government likes to do, but we need to see the outcomes, and we need to see them soon. The thing that affects Hamilton West voters, the hard-working people of Hamilton West right now, is law and order. If you don't deal with law and order, you can have all the access you want to education and health, but someone's breaking into your house or your business and stealing your life away.
You were asked which service you'd personally fund, and you said, no, none. What a Scrooge. Okay, Georgie, what is the most important public service and that you personally want to see funded more of, and where would you get the funds from?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because I support all public services because I see everyday people struggling in our communities and needing more access to public services. So I'm going to not answer the question and probably get told I'm not answering the question, but I'm going to say all of them. Regarding the funds, I mean, we're already investing in these. You would know that. Labour has increased funding to health by 40% since they've been in power. We've had 4,000 new nurses and 2,000 new teachers, as well as 1,600 new frontline police. We're investing in public services, and as a representative for Hamilton West, I will absolutely continue to strive towards equality and investment in public services.
Dr. James McDowell, which public service would you personally want to see more funded of, and where are you going to get the funds?
I'll give you two answers, and the first one's health. I'll keep it like that, and I think I'd go to the transport spend, and I'd probably take some of that money off Michael Wood and things like light rail and other expensive pet projects of his, and divert that. And the second answer I'd give is as ex-spokesperson for Defence, we've put together and committed 2% of GDP for our New Zealand Defence Force, so that we can actually pay our soldiers and frontline people a bit more.
Quick round to all of you. Very quick question.
All right, so
in terms of funds, and getting more tax, should we windfall tax the dirty, greedy banks and their obscene fucking profits? Dr. McDowell?
No.
No?
one word answer.
Naomi?
Yes.
Yes. Tama?
No.
Yes.
Dr. Sharma?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to run through some quick questions. So I'm going to go down this way. Georgie, so my understanding from my deep research on Google is that you were a teacher before starting a body fit business.
Yeah.
So has getting involved in business, running your own balance sheet, being responsible for wages, in an interview to YT News, you're talking about the strain that inflation was put on you. Has that experience changed your thinking about politics? And how much of that would you bring to an MP if you're elected?
I think it's given me a really good perspective. So as well as being a business owner, I'm a union leader, so I spend time representing employees, but I'm also an employer myself. So I have to manage making sure that I'm allowing for my employees to have good pay and conditions while also balancing the books for our business. And it has been hard. I think what it's taught me is that being a business owner is hard, and the impact of inflation is hard, and I would continue to advocate for small business owners because they're such an important part of our country if I was selected as the MP.
So, Dr. Sharma, so I gather from an outsider looking in, you've been on a bit of a journey. You could describe.
That's a good way to put it.
So if you were elected, I know you're probably not that comfortable with labels, but where do you think you would sit on the sort of progressive, more conservative end? So looking at the wider political issues, where if you were not formed your own party, if you had to join a political party today, where do you think you would sit on the political spectrum?
Look, I'll give you a quick example. Three Waters, right? There's some good things there. We want to invest in infrastructure. We want to help the councils for the longer term. But we need consultation, right? We don't want to just take over their assets. I was the only member of parliament out of 120 who took a petition against Three Waters, despite the Labour government saying you can't take a petition against Three Waters. So the point is, right, I'm in the centre, and it's not about my opinion, it's about my constituents' opinion. And often I will not agree with them. But as a member of parliament, it is my duty to take that petition and present it to parliament. Because if you don't, you can't present it to parliament. And being a centrist, that's what it's all about. So I'm right in the centre, and I'm here to hear everybody out. I'm here to hear everybody's opinion, and often it will not match. But I swear that I will take your opinion right to Parliament, and I'll take the fight right to Parliament.
All right. So you want to be the next Peter Dunn.
The worm.
Yeah. Oh, come on. That's not nice. Tama, you've had a really impressive career. You were a lawyer at Bell Gully. I won't hold that against you, although I have many reasons that I should. Running through, you've done some really impressive stuff. You've got some worked for a New York law firm, and you've had some fairly serious jobs. My question is, going back and reading some of the stuff that the speeches that you've given, you were singing the praises of the Green Investment Fund, and there were some wonderful speeches you gave on ESG, the environmental, social and governance movements. A lot of us feels like the sort of stuff that if Georgie was speaking, I would say, yep, I understand. That, Tama has ruled out co-governance. So what am I missing here? Because some of the stuff that you're saying does seem to be kind of centre-left. So where are the conservative values that have made you think, yes, the National Party is the party that I want to support?
I could rattle off all the values of the National Party, like this: loyalty to country, recognition of the Treaty of Waitangi, limited government, doing the work, getting the rewards, personal responsibility, safer communities, support of whānau, all those things I believe in. Okay, so all those things, those values that the National Party stands for, I believe in. Now, there's been some questions and opinions, especially from those north of Bombay, that, hey, you wrote something 25 or 30 years ago. You know what? My wife was married to a different guy 25 or 30 years ago.
But it was still you, right?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I might have had a different girlfriend 25 to 30 years ago, but today I'm married to my wife and I'm proud of it.
Okay, good answer. Right, so, Dr. Naomi, can you just, in an elevator pitch, right? Because this is, you did a PhD, and the topic was exploring concepts of home for return long-term travellers, and it's a PhD that included quite a long poem. So you're running for Parliament. So can you give us the elevator pitch for your PhD, what it was about, and what you learned from it?
Sure. So the PhD, so you can call me Dr. Pocock like you're calling all these other people Doctor, is that concepts of home for returned long-term travellers. So people who live and work abroad, make a home for themselves, return here physically, but might be socially and emotionally still elsewhere. Then how do they find that sense of belonging and community within that experience of return?
Okay, all right. Good answer, James. So, bit of a left field question. So, in the event that you were successful, tell us about the next ACT Party person who would become an MP? Because the way our system works, if the people of Hamilton West have the good sense to elect you, you will remain an MP, so you'll change from a list to an elected MP. So tell us about the next MP who comes in.
It's Miles McConway, and he's a young lawyer from Christchurch. Hard-working guy. He's actually helping out as part of the regional infrastructure down there as well. So he's ready to go. Great guy.
Okay.
We're going to take half a dozen questions from the floor. Jordan, if you want to grab one of the mics, if you want to ask a question, put your hand up. Jordan.
Thanks, Palmer. I'm just conscious that we did say to our supporters that there could be a chance to ask a question.
Yeah.
The team in Wellington are also keeping an eye on our emails and social media, and a key question that is coming through for the National Party candidate, Tama, as I say, huge concern for our members and supporters. You've mentioned the National Party position for no co-governance for the provision of public services. We want to know what your personal views are on the wider matters like resource management, planning and the environment. Do you believe that decisions on things like district plans should be made solely by those accountable at the ballot box? Or do you believe appointed iwi and hapu have a right to be at the decision-making table despite the costs to democracy? Will you fight for democracy in caucus room, or do you believe this must be balanced with modern interpretations of the treaty?
So that's a great question, actually, there, Jordan. I'm glad you drafted that for me. What we've said is co-governance and public services, no. Treaty settlements is different. And actually, the National Party has been right at the forefront of settling treaty claims, and look what a great thing it has meant for Hamilton today, with Tainui Group Holdings and Waikato Tainui doing the good things it is today. So, treaty settlements and things that are forged out of treaty settlements, like the Waikato River Authority, tick. Absolutely.
So the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, their environmental plans must go up to a committee that is co-governed. That was part of a treaty settlement. Do you favour democracy in local government, or do you think that exceptions should be made for things like that?
What I've said is that co-governance through treaty settlements, actually, the National Party has forged that and supported that in the past. Okay, that's what I've said.
But do you?
No, I'm in the National Party. I'm not going to say, look, I don't believe in anything the National Party does. I'm in the National Party, and treaty settlements different to public services. I've made that clear for about 7 times. This is probably the 8th. And I don't think I need to make it clear again.
This question's from one of our staff to Dr. Pocock. You say you're about evidence-based policy, but then spoke about a tax-free threshold when all the evidence is it's the marginal rate, the marginal incentive to work is what matters. Is your plan an example of something that sounds good but is evidence thin? And can you point to evidence that supports a steeper tax bracket, like a tax-free threshold, versus flattening the tax thresholds?
I'm clearly at a taxpayers union debate here.
Sorry,
so
the question's
thank you
got
very
really
much for
boring.
the question. So the tax-free threshold is working in Australia, and there are other jurisdictions. So we have evidence that it does work. We also want to lower the tax bracket for under $80,000 earned. So adjust those brackets, but ultimately where we're aiming towards, and this enables us to set up the systems in place in the bureaucracy, is towards the universal basic income and the flat tax.
Questions from the floor?
I just wanted to ask the ACT candidate, with your tax policy going to 17.5%, from my calculations that means people earning under 50,000 will pay more tax. You mentioned something about it's offset by something, but I can't understand it. So can you explain how, if those people earning under 50 pay more tax, how that's going to be compensated?
So there's this. We pitched a rebate scheme using the carbon tax collected like with the ETS. There's considerable funding that's there, and we would return that to people in the form of a rebate. So yes, it's a good question, and we have factored that in to make sure that those below that wouldn't be affected by it. What it does do is give incentives to actually work harder and earn more and be a productive member of society. You will get rewarded as you move up. So. No.
Is it a UBI?
So, no, it's not universal because universal basic income, by its definition, goes to absolutely everybody. So if you're, someone who doesn't work, you get paid it. If you're a billionaire, you get paid it as well. And it's an incredibly inflationary concept.
Next question.
Not inflationary if it's balanced, and we already have a UBI called superannuation.
Amen.
It's not universal. If I don't get it, it's not universal.
Got it.
Hello, I'd like to know what are anybody up there going to do about the coming fuel crisis? Seeing you've closed Marsden Point, and it used to supply do 70% of the fuel in New Zealand. It had very good bitumen, CO2, sulphur. Now everything's turned to crap basically, and fuel stations are running out of fuel. Their fuel filters being changed around the country because of the poor quality of the fuel. It's got to put the prices up, cause a problem.
Maybe if we just get the national and the candidates that would answer that.
Okay, that's fine. Look, we're really focusing on making sure we get good electrification. That's an energy crisis as well as a fuel crisis. So electrifying and making sure we invest in projects that enable that. What we won't do is just shut down exploration because we feel it's the right thing.
All right, so, Naomi, sorry.
A quick answer. And absolutely an issue. The war in Ukraine has had a big impact, and we know that these costs are increasing, and we need to consider that. What, sorry? Say that again so I could answer your question.
The Ukraine war did not shut down...
Oh, right, sorry.
You did.
I did. Oh God. Okay. I don't think I'm personally responsible, but look, I don't have the information to answer that aspect of the question, so I'll leave it at that.
Next question.
Not getting my vote. My question is for all 5 candidates. Anything and everything that you want to do costs money. So coming into a recession, money management is going to be key. What background does any of you have managing large sums of other people's money? And I don't mean your kids' tuck shop allowance.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, I am a doctor, but I've got an MBA from one of the top business schools in the world. I've been on boards of multiple organizations: Spain, New York, Nepal, New Zealand. So I've worked across, and these are not just health-based companies, so I've done that. And I've been a member of Parliament as well for the last 2 years. And, Parliament with the Labour Party, look, they're spending $1 billion extra a week. So, so that's what I'm saying. You can't get better management degree than looking at what they've done and being part of that caucus. But as I said, having been parts of boards across multiple places, having a business degree from one of the top universities in the world, I was a Fulbright scholar in Washington for 2 years. So I do have a financial background in that.
I also have a business degree, first class honours, and I used to work for Hewlett Packard over in first Switzerland and then London, and I was responsible for rolling out a software package across the world that was used to bill the client. So I also have some financial knowledge as well as my own business, etc.
No, it's not comment.
Okay, can we have another question?
Oh, I wanted to answer that one because I feel like it's one that I can answer because I've been told I haven't answered questions tonight.
Go for it.
I just said I wanted to answer that one because I think maybe you'll feel like I can answer this question, which is that I'm executive director of a union, so we deal with thousands of dollars a year, and that is my responsibility. I'm also a business owner, so again, responsible for the financial aspects of the business.
Next question.
Hi, I've got a small business in Frankton, and personal experience of being smashed into and goods stolen there. Almost daily there's ram raids, people walk into shops running off with stuff. attacks. We've got a car park across the road, people getting attacked and accosted in there on a regular basis. Police are nowhere to be seen. And you ring the police, I've rung the police myself, and they don't come. They're too busy. So they might come the next day or 4 or 5 hours later. I just wonder if there's any appetite for community policing with a higher profile of people in the community, police in the community.
Yeah, just firstly want to acknowledge your experiences, and yeah, it's not a good situation. I absolutely support more policing. We've done some work in that space, but there is much more to go. And if elected as the MP, that is absolutely something I would be focused on working on.
So look, community policing was stopped by the National Party when they were in government. Labour said they would look at it. When I was a member of Parliament, one thing we talked to the police was, because this was one of the biggest feedback we got from our police committee meetings, what they've done now in Hamilton is they've divided Hamilton into 5 quadrants, supposed to be 4 quadrants, but 5 quadrants, and the idea is to get the police to actually be out there in the community so you can know your local police person. Because the biggest issue at the moment is just like the bank and the post shop, it's just a different person every time, and you don't have that relationship. But what's happened is with COVID, with everything else, those relationships haven't really built. So I'm all in favor of having, community policing. The trouble, and this is the conversation again from police, is because National stopped those community police stations, the infrastructure is not there now. So you can't just go back and restart those police stations. That's going to take billions of dollars, and I know Tama doesn't want to invest in that. So, but there is a need for having community police officers out in the community. It's like knowing your local GP. You need to know these people so you can actually tell them what's going on in the community. Talking to the principal at Croshaw School, he was talking about, this is the previous principal, and he was talking about some of the kids at school who he was worried about, but he didn't know who to go to in the police because he didn't have those relationships built in. So there is a problem with that, and community policing will help. But it won't be the way it used to be, where there were police stations all across the country. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, kia ora. Look, we need better resources for the police and the framework that they can operate in to actually escalate and remove these key offenders from the community. Actions, consequences, right? So those are the key things that we really need to crack on with and get going. There are some good programs that the police are running, like Blue Light Disco used to be called back in the day. Those things, they've actually got some success rates, but we need to invest more and more into that space. Got it. Yeah, supper's coming, people.
Cool. One of the things I've noticed about politicians is that they can never answer a direct question. When you're given a 2-part question, answer both parts. It's real simple there. I'm going to do the same, Kay. I prepared this question a little bit earlier. At home, so it's somewhat being covered in some respects there, but treat this like a 2-part employment question. A simple yes or no answer is required, so it doesn't need a microphone from you guys there. Knowing that there is a matrix of work to get this result of what this question is going to be, if the residents of Hamilton would vote you into Parliament on the basis that you would significantly reduce the number of car break-ins or stolen and the number of ram raids and property thefts through New Zealand, would you take that vote?
I think we move. Yeah.
A nice, easy question to end the debate with. Something simple.
Simple. Okay, it's slightly hypothetical, but it's important. We heard on Thursday, I think, that geothermal steam basically is going to be included in Three Waters. And we also have Tainui saying that they own the Waikato River. Does this mean that iwi will have control of geothermal power and hydroelectricity? Could the Labour person perhaps tell us that, or if... And I think...
Kia ora, just to clarify, co-governance in regards to Three Water. The co-governance is regarding governance of the water. There is nothing to do with ownership, and there is nothing to do with the operational aspects of the water.
Look, I'll quickly answer that. And as I said before, I've taken a petition against Three Waters. I think the problem now is for Three Waters, it's become such a mess. And the biggest problem is there's just been no conversation at all, right? I think it needs to go to a referendum now. We've come to a point where there are so many clauses every day, and we've got a Prime Minister who says she wasn't in a meeting, but suddenly they say entrenchment law. And one thing I'll say, not only was she in the meeting, the Prime Minister runs that meeting, right? I've been there. That meeting goes every week. Prime Minister runs that meeting, and she was lying about it again. Right, so it needs to go.
Can I add a bit to that? Rather than taking everything to a referendum as we do in this country, the Opportunities Party would advocate for citizens' assemblies where you take a representative sample of the population and those people are informed by experts to come up with recommendations that then are fed into the democracy. It works overseas.
Thank you. That's what Parliament's for. Thank you, candidates. We are almost finished for tonight. Let us now end with your final 60-second pitch to voters in Hamilton West. Dr. Sharma, your last pitch why Hamilton West voters should elect you to Parliament. Your time starts now.
Well, first of all, as I said, it's about transparency. It's about holding government to account. You've seen that amongst all the people here, I'm the only one ready to hold the government accountable, ready to ask the tough questions from the Prime Minister. Doesn't matter if it's a National Prime Minister or a Labour Prime Minister, I'm ready to do that for you. And I have a career to fall back on. I'm the only person who lives in the electorate, who can vote in this electorate, person who's actually worked hard in the constituency and actually presented all the cases that we've done in transparent manner and been around 52 constituent clinics in your neighborhood to come to you and ask you what your problems are. If you vote for Labour, nothing's going to change. Same majority. If you vote for National, nothing's going to change. 34 MPs sleeping on the job while the government passed entrenchment laws for Three Waters. It could be another extra MP or 3 less. It's all going to be the same. What you need is somebody who actually does the reading. I was with the Water Services Bill on the Health Select Committee. 2 clauses. One said Tomatarawa can make an urgent decision. The second one said you can only challenge it in court. I was the only person who challenged it, and I was a Labour MP then. Right? That's what we need. Somebody who understands this and can challenge it.
Thank you. Tama, your last pitch. Why Hamilton West voters should elect you to Parliament.
Kia ora, and what a beautiful evening it was with the Taxpayers Union. Thank you for your questions. When I look across the twerking ideology, the tilting tango, the momentum of kindness, I ask, who is actually going to get something done? Now, I've got experience in Hamilton. I've also got experience around the world, in Auckland, Wellington, working for different organisations. I've actually got things done in Hamilton, notwithstanding all the challenges that I've had. I operate according to values and according to principles and behaviours. My wife is from Hamilton, from Dinsdale, brought up on Road Street. I've actually done things in different communities to get imperfect outcomes. And imperfect outcomes is what we often end up with in this society. But I can actually get it done. Whereas others, they like to talk about it. I can get it done. Point to something massive in Hamilton that these 4 have done. Point to something that I've done. And know this, a vote for ACT, TOP and Momentum is a vote for Labour. Kia ora.
Thank you. Georgie, your last pitch. Why Hamilton West voters should elect you to Parliament. Your time starts now.
Kia ora. I'm a Hamilton local. I've lived here for 20 years. Bring out my kids here because it's a great place. In the weekends we like to ride along the river path, go to a local playground and pop into my favourite cafe, which is Sugar Bowl in Mairol, because they have the best cronuts. But what I've heard in the communities is that things are really tough, and we've talked about these issues tonight, and I fully acknowledge that things are really tough. And what I would do as the MP for Hamilton West is really advocate for the people of Hamilton West so that their issues are front and centre to the government. I'd be banging on ministers' doors and making sure that their issues were heard. I'm a former teacher, a union leader and a business owner, and I believe I'd be an excellent MP for Hamilton West. Thank you so much for your vote, everyone in the room.
Thank you. Dr. James McDowell, your final pitch. Why Hamilton West voters should elect you to Parliament. Your time starts now.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight. And look, I would just say, I hope that I can convince people that I'm a safe pair of hands. I'm a sitting MP, plenty of experience there, and I've been holding this government to account for 2 years and supporting people with their various issues with government departments and getting results along the way, despite being in opposition. I've been a list MP, focusing on a big broad area, but as the electorate MP, it just means that we get the resources and the focus here on the city, or Hamilton West in particular, but really Hamilton's all one big place with the same issues, and it just means that we can get that message to the government. And I would just my final thing I would say is a vote for me, a vote for the ACT candidate is the strongest way to send that vote of discontent to the government, to show Jacinda Ardern that you're sick of the reality here of what's happening in this country. So please vote ACT.
Thank you. And finally this evening, Dr. Pocock, your final word as to why Hamilton West voters should elect you to Parliament. Your time starts now.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the questions, everybody. I am a project manager, an entrepreneur, and a mother, the daughter of a dairy farmer and a teacher, and I want to sit in the middle and bring evidence-based policy to New Zealand politics through the Opportunities Party. Now, if you look overseas, some of those democracies in Europe are working a heck of a lot better than we are. In the Opportunities Party, we talk about how Labour and National are arguing about what colour to paint the kitchen, while the Opportunities Party wants to fix the cracking foundations. And we want to bring a fairer society, provide everyone with an opportunity to thrive, environmental sustainability, and an efficient economy. So if you vote for the Opportunities Party, you are saying that you also want to tip the balance of power and have the status quo go. Kia ora.
All right. So we certainly ran over our expected time allocation, and you're all still here. So clearly something needs to be done about the entertainment facilities and option in Hamilton, because it's an absolute disaster. I'd like to, before we wrap up, Martin, have a final word, but just like to thank the Taxpayers Union who worked with us at the working group to get this together. I think it's interesting that the candidate who got the least grief tonight was the ACT candidate, which I'm not too sure what's going on there. I think we should all thank Dr. Sharma, because without you, none of us would be here. So I think that's excellent. But I must say the person who impressed me the most was you, Georgie. I think not the friendliest of crowds, but that's what it's about, right? It's about fronting up, and it's about dealing with it, and I think you handled it really well, and I was really impressed. And it may. Can I just say, front up, show up to the Labour caucus. Okay, all right. Sure. So no, time's over. So based on this performance, Georgie, I'm sure you have a political career. I'm not too sure whether it be this weekend, but we'll see what happens going forward. Martin, if you'd like to wrap us up for the evening, please.
Comrades, thanks for tuning into the most important of civic duties, which is to vote. In an age of disinformation, misinformation, and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Thanks to the candidates, Gravity Credit Management, the Daily Blog, the Working Group, the Taxpayers Union, for bringing this evening's debate to the live stream masses from the palatial Sky City Hamilton, kia ora and ka pai.
You got me through that.